implementing student information systems. And so I just want to introduce Amanveer and Simon Blythe. So Simon is the Director of Integration and Application Services at Fujitsu. So over to you, Simon.
Okay, thanks very much, Nancy, and welcome to everybody. I think we've got an audience across the country here, so I really appreciate you joining us today. So Simon Blythe, I'm the Director and Education Services Lead here at Fujitsu for North America. Most of our education work right now is in Canada, so that's where we're going to mostly focus today, but we're hoping to change that pretty soon. I'm joined by my colleague, Amanveer Singh, who's the Director of Product Management for the Education Services Group. And he'll be talking a little bit more about our solutions as we go through the presentation. First of all, just a quick intro into Fujitsu. I think most of you would probably be familiar with who Fujitsu is. We're a global IT services company, 40 billion US roughly in revenues, and 135,000 people. So we're a pretty big organization. But specifically in the education area, what we're really focused on is these 6 areas going forward. So student information services, which is what we're probably best known for. Digital transformation services, which is something that's up and coming now as we're looking at taking people through learning modernization. The cloud and digital transformation components. So cloud, this is really more the technical services, and digital transformation being more the business services. Enterprise and cybersecurity, the transformational application maintenance and support services, which we've always done, and some of the new stuff that we'll have coming soon, which is along the areas of artificial intelligence and process automation. So as I said, we're probably best known for the student information SAS service that we run. We run that with our partner Follett, who provide the Aspen software. But Fujitsu runs that as a service, and that's a key component of some of the things we're talking about today, because it's part of what we're seeing as the general trend towards more of a services-based IT service as opposed to systems-based. And that's going to be a big part of how things are changing going forward. So we're running that we have 3 provincial contracts right now in Ontario, in BC, and in Saskatchewan. And once all of the clients that are fully signed up are migrated, we'll be up to about 35% of the student population across Canada, about 2 million students. So it's a fairly big operation. And obviously the interesting thing is the student information system is central to a lot of the services. So the student information is central, but it's only part of what's happening in education right now. And the interesting thing for me, I came into the education sector for Fujitsu about 4 years ago, but I spent about 25 years working in the public sector in various areas, in all 3 layers of government, and in 3 different countries. And it's quite interesting coming into K-12 and realizing that there's actually been quite a substantial underinvestment in systems over the years in K-12 education. And now what we're seeing in the marketplace is a need to move towards a more modern education system, which is much more student-centric. And what I mean by that is a move towards more personalized learning capabilities. And in order for that to happen, there has to be a lot better access to data. So before, with a more centralized approach, data sort of fed upwards from the users and fed into the systems, and they were generally used more by the administrators. But more and more data is being required in the field, obviously by the educators, but also by parents, by students, and by various support and staff workers as well. So we see these 4 big groups here: the students themselves, who actually need a lot more access. If they're going to be running in a more personalized learning environment, they need a lot more direct access. And we've seen a great deal of that happening right now with the COVID-19 and all the implications of that, as school districts have scrambled to roll out online learning. Then we've got the educators, who need a lot better access to information in much more real time. They need that in an efficient way as well, because educators still have large class sizes to deal with. So on the one hand, you've got to push towards personalized learning, but on the other hand, you can't create an ever-increasing workload for the educators. The system's got to be efficient. The parents are demanding much more information, and actually the teachers are actually demanding that the parents become more involved in their child's education. And so that's a symbiotic relationship, I think, between the two, and that's for the benefit of the students as well. And then when I say empowering government there in the bottom right-hand corner, what we're really talking about is the government's ability to implement policy. And I suppose you could say that's at the provincial or state level, but it's also at the school district level. So if you want to roll out new policy or new capability, how do you do that? And how do you affect change? So this is more of a generic slide, Fujitsu's sort of perspective on how we turn data into value. I'm sure you've all seen variations of this slide before, but basically you're looking at a sort of symbiotic relationship between all of these different components, where if you start collecting the information on the right with controlled systems, you connect it in to the central systems, you collect and collate that information, you analyze it, and then you're able to turn that data into knowledge, which is what creates the value. What we're seeing, of course, is that's always been the case 20, 30, 40 years. What we're seeing, though, is all of these new technologies that are really dramatically impacting the way that people interact and interface with systems, both on the input and on the output side. So mobiles obviously had a huge impact, but we're going to see much more IoT, Internet of Things, coming into play. People have always been interested in analytics, and they've always been doing that even before computers, but now we're going to see much more dynamic analytics and moving towards artificial intelligence. And now on the left-hand side, the infrastructure side, the networks are much more connected than they used to be. Security as a consequence is a greater concern, and the cloud is moving from being a sort of esoteric resource to something that's becoming much more mainstream. So these are all the impacts on the overall environment. What we're going to do today, though, is just really focus on this connect and collect piece. And the reason for that is because, first of all, each of these subject areas could easily take up a whole day just talking about each one of them. But what I'm seeing in the marketplace and what the team is really looking at is how difficult it is to just basically connect information. And without having that information connected in an efficient way, and without having an efficient and effective methods of collecting that information, the whole circle breaks down. So if we just take this is my very simple view of kind of the student information system world. I'm just going to use the student information system as an example because it's the central system to really how the school districts and schools operate, and the one touched by the most people. So if you look at where Fujitsu started in this world, we were typically taking over legacy systems, and we're still doing this today. So when we come into a school district, there's a legacy system. It sits on its own. It's used by a lot of people. It's both the system of record for those people, but also the system of engagement. So the only way of getting information in and out of the student information system is often to use the student information system itself. There's some basic architecture supporting that, and there's a community of support around that, which is usually focused on the IT community in terms of training and knowledge management. As we're moving forward, we're now moving as we move to take over those legacy systems and we're migrating onto cloud-based systems. So in Saskatchewan and in Ontario, where we just started those contracts in the last couple of years, those were rolled out on Microsoft Azure, the Canadian compliance system. We've just the BC system, which we've had for 5 or 6 years now, has just recently migrated onto Azure as well. So now all of our systems are on the cloud. That's great. We've got a cloud infrastructure that gives us, we've got some more portal and mobile access capabilities on the student information system. And we've got some data access capabilities and warehousing, but it's still largely servicing the same audience. So the move to a cloud on its own does not achieve the desired end state result. And that's really kind of what we want to talk about today. Because when you look at it going forward, the school district and the users aren't just interested in the student information system, they're interested in a whole bunch of other systems. And more, we're going to see that the interfaces to those systems are not actually going to be the systems themselves. They're going to be microservices, or they're going to be components of this collaboration fabric that we're talking about at the bottom. So the common applications that people use every day, whether it be the Microsoft 365 suite, whether it be some of the online communications, or whether it be social media. So this becomes an interesting paradigm as to how you're going to create this integration capability, because when we come into a lot of the school districts, what we're seeing is point-to-point integrations between individual applications, and that's not going to work going forward because it's just impossible to keep up with a number of changes in technology. So the impacts on having siloed systems, data quality is a big, suffers in a big way. Often duplications, there's often emissions, we have errors, we have conflicts in data. The problem with having systems that are what we call tightly coupled, that means two systems directly integrated to each other, really creates an inflexibility issue, slows down the ability for making changes, and in fact is slowing down the ability to introduce the changes necessary for the learning modernization program that many of the directors of education and superintendents are championing. There's a lot more cost involved and a lot less opportunity for cost efficiencies. KPIs is an interesting one, key performance indicators. It's all very well introducing measures into the business, but how are you actually going to measure progress if you don't have the access to the data? Security is a big issue. The problem is that the more systems you have, the more footprint there is to attack. And then privacy and compliance. We see a lot of school districts having privacy policies, but it's actually extremely difficult to enforce and maintain those policies when you have disparate systems that have multiple different segregated integration points. And we see other things as well coming up, and freedom of information was one that was flagged to me last year by a group of directors of education as being a major growing concern for them in terms of the ability to actually find data to respond. So those are all some of the issues that we're seeing in the marketplace. And so what we want to do today is give you a quick insight into where Fujitsu is going to look at these problems and what we're doing about it in terms of the technology that we're looking to introduce and the partners that we're working with. So I'd like to hand over to Amanveer now to provide some intro to the education integration platform.
Simon, you're able to hear me?
Yes, Aman, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Simon, and hello, everyone. So Simon, my colleague, has provided you the oversight of the business trends and business landscape. On the next slide, we're going to look at what are the key emerging technology trends that can help us, evolve into that new business model, that your new business landscape that Simon has talked about. So first one is no secret, SAS. So everyone is moving towards SAS due to obvious advantages of manageability, reliability, scalability. And Fujitsu's solution is, again, it's SAS capable. The other key trend that we are seeing is from traditional ESB, which is you can create the services and those services can be reusable. We are more moving towards the open connectors out of the box. So, for example, from Microsoft, we have through their integration platform, we have already pre-built connectors to social media like Twitter. We have pre-built connectors to Office 365, SharePoint, and that's the new model where it should be really plug and play when the new requirements come, not really that you have to build new connector from scratch. Third key trend is from building monolithic applications. Few years back, we evolved into building enterprise web services. Now we are more moving towards really reusable small chunks of microservices. And And the advantages that it provides is it's massively scalable and it's very flexible. So based on your needs, you can spike up, you can spike down based on the business events, it's based on the change in your backend system. It's flexible to route to any other different platforms as well because it's self-encapsulated. So these are the key emerging trends from immediate benefit perspective that we look at. There are some long-term, there's some other trends which have long-term benefits. For example, we have a technology now to replace our traditional request and response to a more event-centric, where it's to handle more real-time situational. Simon has talked about Internet of Things related use cases. So event-centric architecture will take us there. This is where we can actually detect the events, consume the events, and then appropriately react to those events as needed. And then the last key benefit, key trend that we are seeing here is more from the batch type of processing. We are looking at real-time streaming. So this is, ingesting the data in real time, processing it in real time, analyzing it in real time, and then making recommendations in real time. So these are the key trends that we are looking at in the market from technology perspective. Simon, let's move on to next slide, please. Actually, there's a slide in between, education integration platform. Yeah, thank you. So as you see, our ecosystem with what business cases Simon has talked about and some key trends that I've talked about, our ecosystem of technology platforms is going to change. It is going to contain diverse set of technology platforms, and they can be in cloud, not even in cloud, it will be in multi-clouds, or it will be on-premise, it may be third-party systems. And that generates a need of a very cohesive and well thought through strategy for integration. And that's what we have here. It's our education integration platform. It's more of a fabric, decouple multiple systems from each other. And it streamlines the communication between multiple platforms. And one of the key benefits of decoupling is the interoperability. So if you want to replace any backend system or change any backend system from on-premise to in cloud, then that should be as much transparent to its consumers as possible. And that's what this education integration platform provides. Of course, privacy and compliance is of paramount importance. It goes without saying, and that has been taken care of. And it's fully secure, it's fully compliant. Privacy is taken into consideration. So you will look into the next slides where we talk about all these things in further detail. Over the next slide, please, Simon. So now, what are the key requirements? So first one is, with this whole new landscape, we want to make sure that our time to market of new capabilities is shortened. As new trends will come, time is also shortening. IoT use cases need to be implemented in really short time, and as technology changes very fast. So that is what is a key requirement for us. So we make sure that we use standard-based architecture, standard-based capabilities. We don't want to reinvent anything. The second key requirement that we're seeing is consistent integration across domains through standard design patterns. So again, we want to use standard patterns like OAuth, transformation of protocols, asynchronization, microservices, but there are so many patterns out there that we are leveraging, and that's what the need of the time is as well. Instead of thinking through the problem from scratch every time. With this whole new chain of systems, complexity and operational management is of key importance here as well, and that's what we have thought through when we were designing our platform. And then comes instead of building custom applications, we want to use off-the-shelf applications. So when we actually looked at our integration platform, we looked at what the integration platforms were up there in the market, instead of designing anything from scratch, and which is cloud enabled, and that's where the Microsoft platform is really handy for us. Over to the next slide, please, Simon. Now, this slide actually talks about what are the key segments of systems that this integration platform gels together. So if you see, in the middle, you have all the source systems. These are your systems of records, HR system, student information system, ERP system. So, and this integration platform is actually, it enables streamlined communication between all the source systems. Now, in addition to that, you will see on extreme right side, where there are multiple stakeholders and they engage with students source system through the systems of engagement, like learning management system, like websites, like mobile application. And when they are actually invoking those APIs, integration platform is what is in the middle to make sure those APIs are secure, private, privacy compliant, and they meet all the industry standards. And then comes the very important part, which is on your left side, it's either the ministry systems or our growth use cases. So if we want to evolve our business in a particular direction, here example is IoT. So if you want to implement smart transportation, smart attendance, this integration platform is actually, it can be extensible to have those capabilities. So it is IoT capable. It can, as I said, event-driven architecture. It is capable of supporting event-driven architecture, and it can actually extend to those. So these are the key three segments where you'll see the benefit. Systems of engagement, systems of source, and then our growth use cases and the ministry systems. So with that, I will pause. The purpose of this webinar was to share the vision of how we plan around integration to support K-12 education growth. Of course, the details can be covered later on. So I'll hand over to Hannah to see if there are any questions from here onwards.
Thank you, Aman. So to all our participants today, please, if you have any questions, just raise hand or submit your question on the chat button or in the question section, please.
Yeah, I just want to actually, while the people are thinking about their questions, Hannah, I just want to talk very quickly about what our roadmap is here. So this summer, we'll be launching the education integration platform, and the first two components of that are going to have the API management and the managed file transfer piece. So the key thing to understand about this is that this is an integration platform. We're not trying to replicate what the third-party vendors are already producing themselves in terms of their APIs, nor are we trying to replicate or replace standards like One Roster. We're actually going to leverage those standards and those off-the-shelf capabilities. The issue here is to provide the platform to allow all of those things to be coordinated from one place and on an enterprise-wide basis. Then next year, we're going to be introducing more and more functionality in this in terms of starting with data management, workflow and orchestration, and service bus capabilities. These are when we're really using the capabilities within the Azure platform. This is one of the huge advantages of moving to the cloud, is that you get access to all of these things. And then as technology moves on, and particularly as user requirements develop, moving towards more event-based architecture and Internet of Things, which we can see as an emerging requirement in the school system. So this is how we see the progression of things coming forward. We're learning very rapidly from our clients, what their priorities are, and we're building out on those as they emerge. And we've already built, Aman, I'm thinking 8 or 10 connectors to different third-party systems. Is that right? Ready for launch?
That's correct, Simon.
Yeah. So do we have any questions, Hannah, at all?
No, I didn't receive any questions so far.
Do you want to open up for discussion?
Okay, so we'll give maybe 1 or 2 minutes to our attendees to share questions. And if not, we will be happy to see you in our next webinar next Thursday, June 18, to talk more about digital transformation in K-12 education.
Okay, I think if we don't have any questions, then we should wrap up for today. We give everybody a couple of minutes back, and then look forward to seeing and talking to you in the near future. I think we've got another webinar coming up next week.
Yes, Simon. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us.